Timothy Jay Schwab of the God Culture is a liar. He lies about the Bible, he lies about church history, and he lies about the history of the Philippines. That fact has been proven beyond the shadow of a doubt in many articles on my websites as I have dissected his videos and books. In this video I want to gather together 10 of his most outrageous lies about Philippine history. Once these lies are taken into account, the rest of his project falls through and Tim can be tossed off into the garbage where he belongs. Remember, Timothy Jay Schwab claims that in 6 years no one has disproven him, no one ever will disprove him, and that his book Solomon's Treasure is a monumental case no one can disprove. Lie number 1. Filipinos circumnavigated Africa to trade with Greece and Israel. These are not in any necessary order, but the number 1 lie, the most egregious falsehood Tim claims about the Philippines, is that Filipinos were engaged in trade with Israel and Greece via a circumnavigation of Africa. What makes this lie so egregious is that it is an indisputable fact of history that no peoples were circumnavigating Africa to trade with Europe and Asia. Aside from Herodotus' mention of the Phoenicians circumnavigating Africa one time, there are no other claims of this type in the historical record until Bartholomew Dias, who made the first documented voyage around Africa in 1488. In his books and in his videos, Timothy offers no historical sources whatsoever to prove that Filipinos were circumnavigating Africa. His only proof, if you can call it that, is that Ophir and Tarshish are the Philippines, and King Solomon's Red Sea port, from which ships sailed to those lands, was broken, which necessitated going the long way around Africa. That is not proof. That is ad hoc conjecture, and it relies on the Philippines being Ophir and Tarshish, which is absolutely false. Lie number 2. The Philippines is Tarshish and Ophir. This lie is based on a number of things. First of all is his resource test, where he proves that the Philippines has the items brought back from Ophir and Tarshish. But proving that the Philippines is rich in gold and other resources is not the same as proving that the Philippines directly traded within the Mediterranean basin by circumnavigating Africa. Tim never offers any concrete evidence that they did. While the Roman Empire did trade with India and as far as Vietnam, where Roman coins have been found, there is no evidence either cartographically or archaeologically that Romans, Greeks, or ancient Israelites ever set foot in the Philippine archipelago or made this route by circumnavigating Africa. Ptolemy's map of the known world ends with the Malay Peninsula and does not show southern Africa. Tim even admits that India has all the resources brought back from Ophir. With this admission, Tim has really shot himself in the foot. It is a fact that there was trade between India and the Mediterranean, both overland and oversea. Josephus himself tells us that Ophir was in India. As for the Philippines being Tarshish, that is based primarily on a misinterpretation of 2 Chronicles 20:36. Tim actually conflates Ophir and Tarshish as being the same region. Tim's interpretation here is that ships were being built on the Red Sea to go to Tarshish, but the port was broken, thus when Jonah sailed from Joppa to Tarshish he was literally going to circumnavigate Africa to go to the Philippines. But there are no records of anyone making such a journey, thus we can automatically rule that out. The proper interpretation of these verses can be found on the Bible Hub commentary. Another thing Tim misses completely in his testing of the resources is that tin, a resource brought back from Tarshish to Israel, has been subjected to rigorous chemical testing, proving it did not originate in the Philippines. From the Wikipedia article about the ancient sources of tin we read the following. Tin ingots found in Israel which date to the 13th-12th centuries BC are from Cornwall and Devon. Amazing. Nothing about the Philippines whatsoever in this article. Why? Because there was no tin trade between Israel and the Philippines. If there was, Tim does not even remotely try to prove it. He simply asserts that there is currently tin in the Philippines and then moves on. So shall I. Lie number 3. Pigafetta reported seeing elephants in the Philippines. One of the resources brought back from Ophir was ivory. Tim claims a few ancient fossils of mini elephants and rhinos proves that there was a thriving ivory trade between the Philippines and Israel. He further claims that Pigafetta claimed to have seen elephants in the Philippines. This is not true. Pigafetta's account took place after the death of Magellan and the route can be discerned from his journal. They left Cebu for Bohol, next to Cagayan, then northwest to Palawan, then southwest to another island. There is only one island to the southwest of Palawan, and that is Borneo. Pigafetta never reported seeing elephants in the Philippines. It is a complete fabrication on Tim's part in order to bolster his false claims. Lie number 4. The Lequois and Lucoes people are the same. Tim claims that the Lequois and Lucoes people are the same people who live in Luzon. This is absolutely false. His lie is rooted first of all in Pigafetta's journal. Pigafetta clearly writes that the Lequois traveled to Luzon to trade. The Lucoes are the inhabitants of Luzon. He is by no means saying the people of Luzon are known as the Lequois. Then to further back up this nonsense, Tim cites Ferdinand Pinto, who actually visited the Lequois when he was shipwrecked in their land and gave the exact latitude of its location. Tim claims he gave the latitude of the Lequois Islands as 9N20. This is completely false. Pinto writes that the latitude of the Lequois Islands is 9N20 degrees, which is 29, not 9 degrees. That places it well north of the Philippines. Timothy Jay Schwab gets this completely wrong. 9N20 does not mark the Philippines. It marks a place off the west coast of Africa. Lie number 5. The Spanish described certain Filipinos as big, bearded, white men. Tim claims that a document in the Spanish archives describes certain Filipinos as being big, bearded white men. Such a description is never given in the documents to which Tim is referring. Here is the section of this document being referred to in the original Spanish. Here is a translation of that section. Not a word about beards. The Spanish word barba does not show up in the text. The people being described are the Lequois, and we just saw that the Lequois Islands are not the Philippines. The description here is of the Lucoes Islands, not the Philippines. The Philippines is not in front of China, it is to the southeast of China. Lie number 6. No one knows why Cebu is called the Queen City of the South. The lie that no one knows why Cebu is called the Queen City of the South is so confounding because it is easily disproved if one bothers to research the name. The truth is that this name was first bestowed upon Iloilo in 1898 by the Queen Regent of Spain and then transferred to Cebu in the 1980s. If Timothy Jay Schwab had bothered to research the origin of the name Queen City of the South, he would not have written something so dumb as to say the name originates in the Gospel of Matthew. It is a recent name applied only 40 years ago. Lie number 7. Equating Tagalogs with all Filipinos. This lie is actually quite stupid. The Philippines is made up of hundreds of people groups, of which the Tagalogs are one among many. Yet this brainlet writes the following. One thing we find extremely interesting is that the Filipino word Tagalog breaks down as Taga and Ilog, meaning people of the river. Yet, we do not find a significant modern river in the whole Philippines that would define the inhabitants of the thousands of islands. No common denominator found in modern times. Should they not be referenced as the people of the ocean instead? For as much as Timothy Jay Schwab loves the Philippines, one would think he would know that the Tagalogs are one people group among many and they all hail from Luzon. This lie is in service to another big lie that the rivers from Eden are now undersea ocean trenches. Be sure to watch the video where I dismantle that notion. Lie number 7. The biblical land of Havilah is the Philippines. Tim claims that the biblical land Havilah is the Philippines. This chapter is ridiculously Byzantine as Tim ferrets out the meaning of the word Havilah. It means Eve's curse, which means the real name of the Philippines is actually curse. The actual meaning of Havilah is circle. Then Tim attempts to test the resources attributed to it. What it comes down to is that because the river Pison compasseth the whole land of Havilah, that means we have to find a land entirely encircled by a river. According to Tim, that would be the pre-flood Philippines. The Pison riverbed is now the ocean trenches which surround the nation. But there are no ocean trenches completely and continuously surrounding the Philippines. Here is what the Philippines ocean trench system looks like. These trenches do not completely surround this whole land of the Philippines as Tim says it must. Tim's solution is that they were filled in with sediment during the flood. That is ad hoc reasoning which he has not proven and cannot prove. I admit he does have an interesting theory about the ocean trenches being river systems, but that is all he has. He has no evidence there were, nor can he ever provide such evidence. Many of the trenches are in fact tectonic plate boundaries. The likely place for this Havilah is, as the Blue Letter Bible says, near the Caspian Sea. However, there is another Havilah and the Bible tells us plainly where it is located. Havilah is in southern Arabia near Egypt. I do not believe Tim read his Bible and missed this information. I believe he chose to ignore it. Rather than leaving no stone unturned, he has declined to examine Genesis 25:18 and 1 Samuel 5:7 both in his book and his videos because it overturns his thesis. Lie number 8. Lapulapu rejected colonialism. Tim mentions Lapulapu several times in his book, but it is in a video where he claims that Lapulapu's killing of Magellan was a rejection of colonialism. This is simply untrue. Lapulapu did not kill Magellan because he was invading or because he rejected the King of Spain. In fact, he said he would offer the King of Spain his fealty. What he did not like was having to submit to Raja Humabon. Tim does not know this because he is relying only on Pigafetta's journal. Just goes to show how his research is not very deep at all. The following comes from Dr. Danilo Girona, who wrote a book titled Ferdinand Magellan, the Armada de Maluco and the European Discovery of the Philippines. This history is based on years of research and reading primary source documents tucked away in Spain. Here is what he writes concerning this alternate testimony. Some sources however offered a different version regarding Lapulapu's response, claiming he readily accepted Magellan's offer of Spanish sovereignty, even expressing willingness to comply with the demands for the payment of tribute. According to a manuscript by one who simply signed himself the Genoese pilot, but probably Maester Bautista, Magellan demanded from Lapulapu, among them, 3 goats, 3 pigs, 3 loads of rice, and 3 loads of millet and other provisions for the ships. The source noted that the chieftain was prompt and straightforward with his reply. As to the 3s being asked, he had no opposition in complying with 2s, and if Magellan was satisfied with these, they would be complied with at once. If not, he would send whatever pleased him. Another version concurred with the narrative of Lapulapu's outright submission to Magellan's demands, including the payment of tribute. It was the demand of Magellan for him to accept the leadership of a fellow native chief, Humabon, which provoked the Mactan chieftain to anger. Primary sources claimed that the reason which prompted Magellan to explode in anger was Lapulapu's alleged refusal to kiss the hand of Humabon as an acknowledgement of his subordination. Another member of the expedition who made his testimony upon their return in Spain, Fernando de Bustamante, barber surgeon of the Victoria, in agreement with the other testimonies, also recalled that the natives of Mactan were actually willing to accept Spanish sovereignty but were not disposed to accept Humabon as their overlord. Those of Mactan wished to obey the King of Castile, but the said Ferdinand Magellan told them to kiss the hand of the King of Cebu, and those do not wish to kiss the hand of the King of Cebu. It appears that Lapulapu was not the only chief who regarded the order of Magellan to accept Humabon as a supreme ruler of the islands, for others shared such animosity as evident in the testimony made by Juan Sebastian Elcano on the 18th of October, 1522, few weeks after their arrival in Valladolid. His testimony reads, Magellan went from the island of Cebu to the island of Bohol, or to the island of Mayton, sending battles to wage war with the men so that those from other islands may obey the King of Cebu, and those they say that they would obey the King our Lord, and would give him parius, a tribute paid by one prince to another, but that they would not obey the King of Cebu since they are also of the same status, and that they would give the King our Lord jewels of gold. While Magellan seemed to have used Humabon as a political ally to establish his base in Cebu as a springboard for establishing Spanish hegemony, Humabon, on the other hand, had also used Magellan to coerce others to submission to his authority. As Pigafetta recalled, Humabon was said to have asked Magellan, but that if the captain would send him the following night one boat full of men to give him assistance, he would fight and subdue his rival. On the receipt of this message, the captain decided to go himself with 3 boats. Do you see how this story is not so cut and dry, not so black and white? According to these 3 men, the rest of the story is that Humabon, the king of Cebu or Cebu, was using Magellan to manipulate others to be placed under his authority. He was playing political chess like those in power still do today. The old man Lapulapu, eyewitness accounts describe him as an old man about 70 years old, refused to kiss Humabon's hand, though he did not refuse to recognize the sovereignty of Spain. Lie number 9. Filipinos rejected the Santo Niño after Magellan was killed in battle. This is another lie that is easily disproved if one reads the sources. Magellan gave the king of Cebu the Santo Niño. Tim says when Magellan was killed, Lapulapu took the statue as a trophy of war to Mactan and it was never worshipped. The letter he cites is in a book of other documents about the same events. From the very book Tim quotes, The Philippine Islands, 1493 to 1803, Volume 2. 1521 to 1569, we read the following. The fleet set sail for Cebu, where after landing they found the village deserted. In this town when we entered we found therein a child Jesus. Mactan is right next to Cebu, so really Tim is splitting hairs here. It would not be surprising if these new arrivals mixed up Mactan and Cebu. In fact, Legazpi makes this same conflation in this very volume. Tim is also wrong that the natives did not worship the Santo Niño. They admitted they did so. According to Antonio Morga, the natives held the image in great reverence, and it wrought miracles for them in times of need. It is simply not true that the Santo Niño was not found in Cebu or that it was not worshipped. To this day its finding in Cebu is celebrated every year by devotees and the people continue to pray to it for miracles. Lie number 10. The Garden of Eden is underneath the floor of the Sulu Sea. There are many people who think perhaps the Philippines is the Garden of Eden. Tim is not one of those people. In Tim's worldview, the earth was created without oceans and was watered by 5 very powerful rivers which are now underwater ocean trenches. The Garden of Eden was planted on what is now the ocean floor next to several mountains. When the flood came, the barren earth filled with water, submerging the Garden of Eden in mud and dirt, but it was protected and enclosed by golden walls. Enoch and Elijah remain the Garden of Eden's lone inhabitants. The several surrounding mountains became the archipelago known as the Philippines. Now, is this a lie? Yes, but more technically what it really is a fanciful ad hoc theory that absolutely cannot be falsified, which means it is an untenable theory. Perhaps one can do some digging or run sonar tests to see what lies below the ocean floor, but no one is doing that, least of all Timothy Jay Schwab. I know Tim throws in all kinds of old maps and even uses the Book of Jubilees to make his case for this lie, but that's all he's got. A case resting on the information he has gathered together. He has no physical evidence that it is there. He has no concrete real proof at all, and the whole idea is prima facie absurd. These are just 10 of the many lies in Timothy Jay Schwab's book Solomon's Treasure. There are many more lies in his books and videos. If you want to read about them, then read the articles I have written. The links are in the description below. If you are a fan of the God culture, just know that despite the overwhelming evidence I have brought against him, Tim continues to dismiss me by calling me names. He is simply not honest and he cannot stand the slightest bout of criticism. Let's end with some words of wisdom from Tim. When you make up history that doesn't exist, you are a fool. Indeed, Timothy Jay Schwab of the God culture is a fool.